But I think that there's a bit of a draw, isn't there, to well, when you're young, you think London's the only place you can sort of make a dent. Is it? Fuck.
Yeah.
It's just, I think if you, I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong, but it's just not. It's financially, even if you're absolutely minted, it doesn't seem like good financial sense to buy or live there for what you could get elsewhere.
Completely.
There's always been my conundrum with it. I think you need money to properly burn to actually justify living full time anywhere in any zone.
I started recording. You would have heard that Zoom's done that funny. I don't know when it started doing that, but it's really very, very offensive. It's being recorded. And I remember the first time it did it. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm looking down, I'm currently in the process of peeling off loads of like tape on my legs because I fucked my legs over the weekend. And it's annoying me. I'm peeling it off. I started peeling it about an hour ago and stopped because it was hurting. I was being an absolute pansy. So I'm using you as a slight distraction from me removing the tape.
No, that makes sense. I would do the same.
But I thought I'd start recording now because I actually think we were kind of on an interesting point there. You've mentioned that you've previously done the stint in London. I've done the stint in London. I lived there for 12 years. I studied there. I worked in architecture there. I realised that architecture, as great as it sounds, is a really shit industry to work in. It sounds good, and on paper it looks really good because it looks like it's like, you know, my goal when I was younger was like, I want to be on 30k before I'm 30. I just thought that always sounded good. And I did that when I was like 23, I think it was 23 or 24. And I was like, I'm doing well. And then I actually spent a bit of time plotting it out on how many hours I was working for that 30k. And it equated that I was really working crazy overtime. I was working for an Australian firm in a London office on projects in Canada. And that meant for 2 to 4 hours of downtime between all the offices internationally, which is just like so unsustainable. And yeah, you're completely right with London. Like, you just get to a point where it burns you. It's an amazing place to visit, incredible place to visit. But living there for so long, it just gets to you and it burns you out. And I think the whole pandemic has changed a lot of people's stance on living in a city. You know, it's really changed that. You don't need to be there now. And, you know, remote working seems to be so much better. And like for what you do as well, there's no point in you being in the city.
No. I'll visit. Don't get me wrong. I will return. It's a fun place to visit. There's people I need to see there. There's things to get done, but lack of green space, the financial implications, and the availability of other things that keep me happy is just much more wide-reaching up here. I mean, I did grow up in Scotland, which helps, but I obviously sound very Scottish, as you can probably tell at this point. But yeah, I don't really know why I sound the way that I do. Before we move on from that, I get asked that once a day at the very least. But
I sound, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Sort of northwest Peak District. I get people have said the south before. People have said Northumberland. It's who knows. I'm eclectic, but I think. I grew up in Edinburgh in the city and thought, I'm a city boy through and through. Spent a lot of time in London, and whilst I did enjoy it, I feel that there's as I said, I think it needs to be the right job for the right person. Otherwise, I do genuinely believe there's more to life in the UK if you are not in London for the right reasons necessarily. Or in the right city for the right reasons, shall we say. I mean, it doesn't just apply to, it feels like we're being very punitive here, but I think the environment is where we spend, the environment in which we live and operate is where we spend most of our time. So choosing the right one for us makes most sense in long term, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, completely agree with you, completely agree. And I can see behind you, something I really want to bring up is I can see over your shoulder a Movember plaque.
Yep.
And I have one of those Movember plaques as well.
2 of them.
I've got the same. My one's the same as your wider one. I've got the other side.
I've got that one there and that one there.
Yeah, I've got one like that one. The one that's more like a proper like brick size one is pretty good. But
no, it's. I'll just need to wipe the blood off it. But it's that's the 2020 Inspiration Award, and that is the 2021. No, 2020. So that was awarded in 2020, but that was the Inspiration Award for 2019.
Yeah,
and that is the top UK individual fundraiser in 2020. That one there. So,
how much did you fundraise in the end last year for Movember?
About £47,500, I think. Which I was very, very, very pleased with, and it was the sort of third year of doing it, and the year that definitely had the most actual tangible impact in terms of human interaction as well. So it was a bit of a squeak for my chair in the background there, but
I thought it was a small dog or something there.
No, it did sound like that. It did sound like that, but it was no. Last year was great. And I think it's helped me understand how to have a bit more of a wide-reaching impact in the future. But I think for 3 years of going absolutely throw the kitchen sink at 3 projects that were incrementally growing, I've learned an awful lot about how to just, well, I've made it up as I've gone along, to be completely honest, but I've learned an awful lot about how to manufacture these things into engaging projects that can actually have longer lasting considerations. I mean, I think last year could have been much, much more had it not been for restrictions, which is encouraging. Somewhat disappointing because I'm never gonna do that exact project again in different circumstances, obviously. But I think it's taught me the lessons I need to learn to take things a bit further in the future, which is very exciting.
Yeah, last year was a tricky year for fundraising for. It just was, but it was also at a point, when we mentioned Movember, where the kind of support that Movember do, especially on the mental health side, last year was, from what I've heard from one of the guys that I talked to at Movember, they were ridiculously busy. There was a large amount of people really, really struggling, and that is, anxiety to do with the pandemic and the situation we're globally in. That's being stuck at home, not being able to see your friends, not being able to see your family, not being able to reach out. There's so many different aspects to it. And it was, I found last year really tough. I found it really, really tough. And for me, it was the whole pandemic became the catalyst for why I moved out of London. It was a massive catalyst to it. And some people react to these situations positively and some people react to them very negatively. So it's incredible how much you managed to do to support them last year with all things considering. I think we all had to be very fluid and flexible with our plans and ideas that we wanted to do for 2020. I don't even know what year it is now.
Yeah, it's a bit of a blur, isn't it?
But yeah, massive, huge respect for what you managed to do last year. Like, it's an incredible amount of money raised, absolutely incredible amount of money raised.
Thank you. No, it was. I mean, it's funny how it's all concentrated into 1 month, but it was a month, a year-long project really in the making. It was sort of the second I finished 2019. It was theorizing, conceptualizing, and get the wheels in motion for what ultimately became 2020. And yeah, it's just a steep learning curve I've forced myself to go on through, just chucking the kitchen sink at it each year, as I've said. And obviously having an amazing support network around me, having the support from Movember, and most importantly, seeing the impact of the fundraising firsthand with the groups and that side of things, because where Movember have openly said they're not going to step into is into the sort of immediate reactive stuff like the call centres, because that's almost covered. The UK has Samaritans, it has Calm, it has it has accessible options, and to just keep pumping money into new hotlines and things like that, I agree with them that it would be a poor use of funding to do. So having seen some of the group projects, community projects that they funded, that's where I see the most real impact firsthand, which has just inspired me to keep going really. And the buzzword of community, I think, is kind of why I was drawn to the charity in the first place, because it has more of a sense of belonging to being a part of it than, well, it's the only charity in the world with cult status, for one, which helps. And that was what drew me to it in the first place, because well, in honesty, it was probably another way for me to disguise the fact that I was talking about an uncomfortable subject matter, because it was kind of a cool and subversive charity in many ways. But in reality, the execution of what they do is in no way attached to the image that allows you to enter in the first place. So I think it really lowers the entry point for people to have conversations about these things, which is why I think they've done such a great job, and why I'm going to continue to fly the flag in one way or another.
Yeah, it's great to hear, and you completely nailed it with them. They're very open about the fact that the hotlines through Samaritans, etc., are so good as they are, and it is the community projects and community outreach stuff, and the advice that Movember put out there, which is so good. The information you can get online through their websites and social media is fantastic, and they invest a lot of money into that, and also invest it into these community outreach projects and supporting them, which is we're singing from the same hymn book, basically. We are. Yeah. And I realize I haven't really introed you in any sort of way, but it's pretty standard for me not to do that, because I always feel with my podcasters, it's normally just something sounds interesting, so as soon as it does, I press record and just see what happens and carry on with it. And so I wanted to just briefly say how you and I got in touch. We got put together from Gillian from Cervélo, who is a legend in her own right. Lots of time for Gillian. She's a great person. And she was basically like, you guys should do a podcast or something. And was talking about like this X-Tri stuff. And I was just like, oh, what the fuck is this? This just sounds mad. And that's coming from someone that does 24-hour and ultra distance races. I was like, this sounds stupid. That was literally the first thing that went through my head. And you go and do it.
Yes. As a overweight powerlifter, basically. Well, not overweight, but a heavier than average cyclist. No, I'll try and give a bit of context, really, in the sense that I was a rugby player for most of my teenage years. I got bashed in the head one too many times, which put an end to any ambitions there. I had 3 concussions in 4 weeks and was actually pretty close to some brain issues on the third one. So that was, in no uncertain terms, do not play any contact sport for the near future.
How long ago was that?
8 years now. 8 years it would have been. I've played it.
It's like concussions come a long way since then, hasn't it?
It was just as it was sort of becoming a cause for concern. Not mainstream yet, but there were whisperings in the background of actually how poorly it was being handled in pastoral circumstances at schools, in professional sport. And then there was the NFL scandal that came out, and that sort of brought it to the surface. We actually got into a bit of a spat with the school I was at the time for just a lack of understanding on the recovery that went with it and things like that. And it was isolated as one individual that had his own opinions on concussion and things, but the school handled it very well in the end. And I know now how much focus there is because the research comes so far. But then basically just dabbled in a bit of everything for a while as a way of filling the gap that I lost from not going to my training on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, and occasional Monday evenings it was as well. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning S&C. That was all gone after the third concussion. That was it. So just sort of picked up self-driven health and fitness, educated myself like mad on it, and just lost a lot of weight. I went from being about 102 kilos playing back row at about 16, 17 years old. A fairly dynamic 102 kilos, but I was a big teenager. And then went all the way down to 76 and was running 37-minute 10Ks. Just no idea what I was doing, just pure grit and self-determination to get me there. Then ended up tearing my calf a couple of weeks before I was due to do my first Olympic distance triathlon. Let that heal a little bit, and then basically put all my eggs in the basket of powerlifting, because I met a friend called Andy who kind of drew me into it, and did that for 4 years and ended up competing internationally from Finland to Las Vegas even. And then 2017, I did my final competition. It was the British Championships, and I just left it a little bit just didn't feel like I was traveling an hour and 10 minutes each direction from Balham to Wembley to train at a gym that gave me what I wanted, the environment, the equipment, the sort of people around me that made me want to be a part of the sport. And then it was put into perspective when I did that competition that actually I just didn't care about this as much as I once did. So then just kept training like a powerlifter, did a bit more hypertrophy stuff, was doing a bit more sort of conditioning on the road, just playing around with my training for a little bit as an anchor for my day-to-day life whilst I was working and living in London. Mainly just for staying in shape, just escape from the day-to-day hustle and bustle of day-to-day life, the way that most people use health and fitness in many ways. And then I started to slip back into what I then recognized as depression and thought, right, you need to find a solution for this. So what were you missing last time you felt depressed? A sense of purpose. Okay, what do you need to do? You need to find a sense of purpose. What are you good at? You're good at squatting. Okay, I'd squatted 600 pounds in competition. No, 600 pounds in the gym and just a little bit less than that in competition. So 600 pounds is 272.5 kilos. And I think I'd squatted 260 in a competition as well. So squatting was my strength. And I thought, okay, do a charity project, squatting charity projects. Let's get thinking here. Go on. Okay, what should you do it for? Movember. That was kind of part of rugby. I'll look them up. Words. The mustache talking point. That's kind of cool. That makes sense. Easy one to talk about because people have done it before. If I do it for men's mental health, that kind of makes sense because, that's kind of important to me, but I hadn't mentioned this to anyone at this point. Yeah, this all makes sense. I'll do this. And then did a bit of digging on figures and found out that 500,000 men around the world every single year, a number that's increasing now, die by suicide. And obviously came to the conclusion that I was going to attempt to squat 500,000 kilos cumulatively in 24 hours to represent that figure. So set myself on a journey where I had to get my strength. My strength base was all the way up here, up very, very high, but my aerobic base wasn't anywhere where it needed to be able to sustain that strength over time. So that's where I met my coach, who is still my coach and now business partner, Jonathan Payne, who sort of brought me up to where I needed to be for that, which involved just incrementally doing a lot more zone 2 work, really becoming a bit more comfortable in turning over that strength repetitively over time and just building that work capacity to where it needed to be. So this was my first Movember project, which was kind of clear, but I threw the kitchen sink at it, said yes to absolutely every opportunity that came my way and ended up raising about £25,000 in year one, I think it was, which was incredible. But I was 127,000 kilos in, about just under 5 hours into the what was a world record attempt. And after my first significant break, I was very much on track. It was in a really good place. After my first significant break, I think with hindsight, there wasn't enough mobility back in my legs, having just done over 2,000 squats at 60 kilos before I went into another period of doing 2,000 squats at 60 kilos. So my first rep after the rest, I physically could not actually get down into the squat without having the weight on my back because it was just a bit more of a pressure to actually get me to hit the bottom position. And then on the second rep of that set, I slightly tore my MCL and sprained my patella tendon. So that was game over. But as I was lying on the floor, crying my eyes out, I realized that I didn't really care about that. The old Fergus would have been you failed. You've let yourself down here. What a waste of time. What an embarrassment. But I had people that were up at 3 a.m. on a school night, just pouring with messages saying, doesn't matter, process was more important. Look at how much you've raised. Look at the conversations you started, all this. And throughout this process, I actually shared my own experience with my own mental health and the suicide attempt that followed in May of 2016 as part of that experience. So I was kind of lying on the floor, crying my eyes out, reflecting on how much I'd learned about myself, how much I'd helped other people learn about themselves, I guess, in many ways, and how much I'd learned about myself in terms of what I enjoy, how I can train, what's important to me, and all these things. And then from that moment on, I've kind of just been a bit of an endurance junkie whilst keeping my strength at a semi-decent level in the grand scheme of things. So since then, it's been the first thing I did after that, because I could swim but couldn't cycle or run, obviously signed up to Ironman Lanzarote about 4 months after the injury. So I decided if I've got a month, I've got a month to get confident in the pool. I've got 3 months to get confident in the bike. I've got 2 months to get back on my feet running effectively. And that's exactly what I did. So it was a slow time, but I got around the Ironman Lanzarote course, which was the first triathlon that I'd done in 2019. Then Movember Project Part 2 couldn't be bigger, but it could have been broader, was my logic here. So I did 3 events across the month. So on the 1st of November, I bodyweight lunged 6,890 meters to represent the UK and Republic of Ireland suicide rate in 2018. That took me about 4.5 hours and is the furthest anyone has ever bodyweight lunged. Way to carve yourself in these sports, let me tell you. On the 7th, yeah, very niche, very niche. Would not recommend. It's not fun at all. ESPN turned down my very, very inflated offer. But the 17th was a 13-hour, 13-man workout in London with the intention of drawing attention to the statistic of 30 male suicides a day. And we raised about £18,500 in that one day alone. So brought together a real good group of guys there to just kind of play on the idea that we're stronger together. All these guys were ostensibly strong, jacked, in shape, very, very outspoken, confident people that were all coming together for this cause. So that was amazing. And then on the 29th and 30th, I ran 94 miles from Loch Lomond to Murrayfield, where I organised a sort of 200-person local mental health charity, Movember, and then some individuals to just sort of come together and share their stories and what they're up to and what their charities do in 15-minute segments throughout the 2 hours. And then I ran in for, well, I was 15 minutes late, actually. It was 10 a.m. I was meant to be there, and I arrived at so 22 hours and 15 minutes after I'd started, I arrived into Murrayfield at 10 for that event, and that concluded year 2. So that was £32,000, I think. So incrementally growing again. But you're seeing a theme here where I'm kind of starting to build my ultra capacity, build my aerobic capacity, build my endurance capacity, all whilst keeping up the strength work. And then in 2020, I started training for the Celtman, which is the Scottish installment of the Extreme Triathlon World Tour, more of which we will come to. And then COVID happened. So, well, actually, I was training for powerlifting competition in April, which I thought I'd just do as a reason to stay strong rather than just become a triathlete, I guess, because I thought there'd been I didn't need to sacrifice all the work that I'd done for the previous 5 years. And I did enjoy the training, but if I did it alongside something else, I might enjoy it a bit more, which I did and still do. So that was the right decision. But the powerlifting competition never happened. The Celtman never happened. So I then pivoted into, what was next? So July 2020, I kind of turned my training from the Celtman, all the base building and all the work that I've been doing there, into what became a race with somebody over in the States to become the first person in the world to squat 500 pounds and run a sub 5-minute mile in the same day, which is something that's been spoken about in the CrossFit community for about 12 years and has never been done. They conceived it impossible because it was sort of balancing very different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But then it turns out that me and this American both managed to do it within a week of one another, which was exciting. So, on the July 26th, I think it was. Yeah, I managed to squat 500 pounds, run a 4:58 mile. And then because the American had done it the week before me, I ran a marathon as well. The intention was 50K, a sub 5 hour 50K, but for anyone that's seen the video or would like to see the video, I saw a separate dimension crossing the line for that 4:58 miles. So I think physiologically, my body did not know what was going on once I hit 25K into a 50K, and I started cramping in places that I didn't know anatomically existed.
Did you cramp
that was
ears?
What was that?
You cramp in your ears? I would imagine.
Yeah. It was cramping my adductors that I'd never had before, and I just really did not enjoy that. Really, when you just kind of, you ever put pressure on your hip flexor and it's like that really bony. It felt like that, but as I was running, I was like, I don't like this one bit. And ended up running a marathon that day, as along with the 500 pound squat, the sub 5-minute mile, and that kind of put me in this space where I'm known as, call myself a hybrid athlete, but in balancing strength and endurance, basically, or strength, speed, and endurance concurrently, which is something that's challenging to do. But it's what it boils down to is just being quite analytical and being quite logical about the way that you manage your programming, your workload, your stresses, and all these things. And then November 2020 was Project Vertical, where we discussed earlier about raising the 40, 45, 47, whatever it was in the end, £1,000, which was an attempt at the world's first vertical marathon. So I was thinking, Ross Edgley's pulled a car for a marathon. Somebody's probably swam a marathon. I'm sure somebody's done something for about climbed a marathon across several days or something. But has anyone ever done one that way? The answer was no. So obviously an idea was born, but we wanted to really build it around the message of the mountain, in the sense that the year that we'd all had the mountain, it felt like we were all climbing a mountain. There've been lots of false summits. There've been lots of real ups and downs, and the feeling of those false summits is something that we all had to deal with. So we really played on that message of the mountain as part of the project, and the intention was to encourage people to climb your own mountain, climb their own mountain. So Johnny and I, my now business partner and coach, he came together with me as part of the messaging, in the sense that we are stronger doing these things together, and attempted to continuously ascend and descend Ben Nevis. The aim was 31 times in 11 days, because that was all that budget, volunteer time, and out of office time from work allowed for. But we started on day one in Storm Dennis, I believe it was called. So 95 mile an hour winds, and 12 to 16 hours of rain, I believe we were up there for. So we started day one with the intention of breaking the back of it with 4 summits in 24 hours, and then slogged out two very slow, very draining, very, very challenging summits on day one, which put us on the back foot for the rest of it. So we quickly pivoted to realizing that the best thing that we could do for the sake of the project and the messaging was just to continue showing up and giving everything we could each day. So ended up finishing the 11 days, having completed 22 summits of Ben Nevis, climbed just under 30,000 meters and covered over 210 miles, I think it was. And had, started a whole load of conversations in the process. We started an email account for the project, which became our cookie jar. If that we were ever in a real hole, we'd kind of open an email for somebody explaining why the project was meaningful for them, or how it had helped, or how they were climbing their own mountain. And there were about 850 emails in there, which was incredible. And some range from "go on lads, you're doing great, keep it up," to one was 2,500 words, and was a proper expressive account of how their life had been influenced by it. So that reading stuff like that, is very hard to feel sorry for yourself in the rain, when the impact of what you've decided to do. And at the end of the day, I put 11 months of work into this, and you'll know from doing ultras, with all that context, it's so easy to think, fuck this, in the moments when they come, because it's such a reactionary experience. But that's why, for me now, the lessons that come from these things are so valuable, and the thought of them doesn't really scare me anymore. So it's that kind of leads into how we got into this topic of conversation anyway. So that's an athletic and charity history. But the reason we got here was because of the extreme triathlons, and the Keltman I was meant to do in 2020. That was obviously postponed until this year, and it was still quite touch and go until not long beforehand, to be fair. So 12 weeks out, I got the notification that it was going ahead. I knew I still had a place, but I got roped into in early Feb, I got roped into a 12-hour max distance ultra on my feet in mid-March. So I kind of thought, right, if I just do that, I'll have enough of an aerobic base in me. I'll have enough of an engine that I can translate into the Keltman and not have to worry about it too much. So I had 12 weeks of, not 12 weeks. I had a run into that 12-hour max distance ultra, did that, recovered from that, and then basically had 12 focused weeks to prepare for the Keltman. And whilst keeping up the strength work, whilst actually leaving employment and going self-employed. So there was a lot going on, but 12 weeks of focused training to basically take part in a 3.4 kilometer swim, a 202 kilometer bike ride, and a marathon in Glen Torridon and the surrounding areas of the Scottish Highlands, which was a magnificent experience. And not long before things really started to ramp up, Cervélo got in touch, and we sort of made that partnership happen, which I'm very, very grateful for, and have been having a fantastic time flying about in the P3X since then. But they actually now sponsor the Keltman as well, so it was a really nice way to sort of affirm that. And as I'm from Scotland, it was kind of a beautiful entry into this. But the aim is I am going to try and do every single one of the extreme triathlons, well, within a certain time. I'm not going to set a time period, but I'm going to try and do every single one over the next couple of years, because there's a lot of them. They're in incredible places. They're in incredibly beautiful and remote parts of the world. And they're not races. I wouldn't describe them as races. I'd describe them as experiences with finishes and times, because the Keltman it felt completely different to Ironman Lanzarote, because it didn't feel like you were competing against the person next to you. It didn't feel like you were chasing a certain time or a certain metric. It did just feel like you were really immersed in that experience. And that's why I think they're so valuable. And that's why I've enjoyed it so much. And ultimately it's just another opportunity, another human expressive way of exploring your environment. And if I can tell someone at the pub that actually in a couple of years' time, I've done an extreme triathlon in Siberia, they'll go, pardon? What? You visited Siberia and explored it via wetsuit swimming, a bike, and then on your feet, you mad bastard. What's the point in that? And then I can explain. And I can actually give them a bit of a spiel about why I got into this, how I got them there, and we'll probably end up talking about things that they never expected about. And that's why I find it so fascinating, and why I'm fully sold on these races and these experiences, because I'm not actually competitive at all with anyone anymore other than myself. And that gives me the freedom to, yeah.
Yeah. I'm 100% with you.
It's freeing, isn't it? It's freeing.
Just that statement, I'm not competitive with anyone at all apart from myself. That is what, in my opinion, 99% of athletes, actually just take that out, 99% of humans need to remember. Yeah. Because there is obviously, like, I do on a similar sort of elk, I do ultra distance races across countries, which it is about that experience of where you are, the situation you're in, waking up at sunrise, or, riding through the sunrise and the sunsets, riding through the night, whatever it is. And having done those in countries like Kyrgyzstan, Morocco, Australia, yeah, where you are very much just at one with yourself and the situation you're in. You completely negate about the fact that there's other people doing the race and there's a start time and a finish time. It's all about that experience and enjoying that experience and personally pushing yourself to what feels right for you. And I think a lot of that experience comes from having done multiple different things, and it comes from age as well. I know when I was younger, I would have just I did just push myself to breaking point many times. First time I did the national 24-hour time trial, which was 4 years ago now, I rode through, it was a storm in July, which was weird anyway. It was in Wales, not so weird. There was this crazy storm and it was -3 at night. And I pushed through the night for quite a long time until I got to a point where I was so cold that I had to stop. Couldn't warm up, was hypothermic, was like blue lips, seized up joints, sat in my car, had no dry clothes because I'd used it all. And my mate Jimmy supporting, and Jimmy was just like, "You're fucking stopping." And I was like, "Yeah, you're probably right. That's a good idea." But I pushed myself to a point where it was, one, dangerous to continue. And then the detrimental effect that came from that meant I got pneumonia. So I was in hospital for that. And then I sort of tried to push through the pneumonia quite quickly, way earlier than I should. And I got shingles, which I always think shingles just sounds funny, but it is fucking painful. And that shingles set me back by 6 months. I was basically bedbound for 2 or 3 months because of it. And, that experience has made me kind of go, a lot of the stuff I do, I'm pushing myself as far as I'm comfortable with. And if I think I'm going to get to a point where this is dangerous, whether that's, physically dangerous or whatever the situation is, I'm quite happy to just stop. Because I'm only challenging myself. I don't really give a shit what other people are doing. It's about how comfortable I am to push myself. And sometimes that's a lot further than other people. Sometimes it's not, that's the nature of these kind of things. And when you're going and doing these things in these crazy locations, it's so individual and personal to the experience you're in and the time you're in, the situation you're in. There's so many factors out of your control that you have to allow them to, I guess you have to allow yourself to understand that these things happen. Now, obviously, there is an element of pushing yourself as hard as you can, but there is also an element of maturity, of understanding that there is a point where you need to go, I could do some serious damage here.
It's self-awareness is sort of the key word, I think. And I think that's multifaceted in the sense that it comes from experience, and experience isn't something you can read in a book or learn on an online course. It's something that being experienced is experience times X amount.
Mm-mm.
And I view these ultra events, just any physical challenge that pushes my boundaries. It doesn't need to be mentally long or in mad environments. It just needs to be something that is intimidating ostensibly or pushes me as an individual. But I view them all as there are a series of unknown lessons to be learned in these experiences that I do not yet know. There's questions I don't yet know that I'm going in search of answers of. And that's where I find the real value, and where Jan Frodeno will still have this experience, and he'll finish a 9-distance race and still have learnt lessons that he wouldn't have done had he not done that race. In the same way that Billy from Basingstoke, doing his first half Ironman or his first long bike ride, his first century bike ride, whatever it might be, will learn lessons that will carry him forwards. And I think the self-awareness that goes with that is partly the bravery of actually just saying, fuck it, I'm going to give it a go. And then not getting pushed back when things do go wrong, because they will, 100%. No professional athlete, no person, no successful person ever has ever got there without bumps in the road. But I think it's once you get hit with a bump, or once there's an obstacle in your way, it's how do you get through it, over it, around it, and then what do you take from the experience of doing so moving forwards that's most important. And I view myself as an athlete in many ways, but I just do these things because I view it as a holistic part of who I am. There's lessons from the Kelpman that I'll take with me into my day-to-day life about just a better understanding of myself. And I think the big thing for me now is just finishing each of these experiences knowing that I gave it all that I could.
Yeah, exactly.
And if that doesn't reflect in the time that I necessarily predicted that I might be capable of, then it doesn't matter. The prediction was wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm completely honest with myself about all this stuff as well now. But again, 2 years ago, would I have been? No. 4 years ago, would I have been? Definitely not.
Yeah.
So self-awareness is something that's practiced, but it's something that's translatable into day-to-day life as well. And so the self-awareness that comes from, oh shit, probably should have stopped before my lips went blue, is something that you can probably take, maybe be a little bit less stubborn about other things in your day-to-day life that you're so determined on. Like, what's the phrase? It's like investment bias, but basically Concorde, great example. Concorde, the whole reason that the French and British government kept pumping money into it was because they'd already pumped so much money into it, even though on paper it was never ever going to work financially. They thought, well, we can't abandon this project because we've spent surplus of billions of pounds on doing so. So it's knowing that actually, to a point, you have milked the experience, the lesson, for as much as it is worth. What do you now do with that to step back, to move forwards, rather than just putting yourself in the bin for, as you ended up in, with pneumonia to shingles, and then the recovery off the back of that must have been continuous for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's still something I have to be very conscious of. The shingles, much more. The problem with pneumonia is it weakens your immune system, and when you do anything that's endurance focused, your immune system becomes compromised very, very quickly, and that's just the nature of it. It's the nature of doing anything that's multi-day events. You're putting a lot of strain on your body, and it compromises your immune system. So it's something I have to be very aware of for everything I do. And it's little things like, so when I did the ride around the UK last year, I wouldn't shake people's hands. And a part of that was because of COVID. But a big part of that was because I'd happily fist bump people. It's just, that's a barrier to the transfer of germs, which sounds such a stupid little thing, but it's something that I was very, very aware of. Riding 21 days, it was 107 miles every day for 21 days. But it doesn't sound crazy, but it was fucking hard. It's over 21 days. It was hard because it was non-stop, and having to, balance that. And
so often, city.
So often with these things is I've always found with long distance stuff, it's not necessarily about being as strong as you can be for it. It's about being as resilient as you can be for it, being able to sustain, to keep injury away, and also to be able to keep healthy and keep your metabolism, your mental health, your physical health, all of it in good check, and keep your immune system strong as well, which is incredibly hard to do, especially when you're tired. And Scotland was fucking brutal when I rode.
Yeah, it doesn't give you anywhere to hide. It really doesn't. It doesn't.
It was a tough one, and I'm literally, the reason why you see this red tape I'm holding, this is from my knees. I'm going through one of these very similar situations that we're discussing right now, literally at the moment. So I raced the National 100-mile time trial on Sunday. On paper, went into it going, I've never actually done a 100-mile time trial. I don't really know how I'm going to go. I'm using it as a chance to remind myself of what my fueling strategy is for looking at the National 24 time trial, which is next weekend. And, knew what kind of pace I was going to aim for. I was aiming for like 270 watts for the race. And I know that would have put me to do a very competitive time. I know how aero I am on a bike. I know I've got enough experience to know that would be a successful time. That'd be good. That's like top 10, top 20 position.
What time would that have given you? Hypothetically?
I reckon 3:30, 3 hours 30, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And which is not a winning time by all means. The winning time was 3 hours and 18 minutes, which is insane.
That is insane.
It's insane.
It's mad.
But to be fair, that's by like one of the best time trialists in the UK.
Where was the course?
Wales. It was Shitweather again.
Okay. It doesn't help, does it?
No. And so I went into it thinking, this is more of a training thing. It's not necessarily a racing thing. Obviously, it's a race, but there's something very important to be said about the process of preparing, getting ready for a race, normalizing that as much as possible. First 50 miles, brilliant, felt great. And then a problem occurred, which is a problem I've persistently dealt with since I was 17, on and off. And I've never been able to solve it. And that problem is I also suffer from tendonitis, which was caused from rugby, dislocated knee, dislocated the wrong way. It's never been quite right since.
Rugby leaves permanent scars.
It's a great sport, amazing sport, but also
there's nothing better for building character as a sport on the planet, but there's risk. There is risk.
And so my knee flared up, caused quite a lot of pains in the tendons. Then also, because you're aware of it, you start overcompensating with your other leg, which then means that starts to play up. Bike position ends up being twisted, and I was in quite a lot of pain. I still have 50 miles to go. So I was going through my head going, right, I've got two tactics here. I can carry on riding at this 270 odd watts and probably do some serious long-term damage, or I can hone it back to 220, 230 watts and just finish. That was my stance, was drop the wattage down, just deal with it. And then basically in the last 10 miles, just drill it and see what happens, which is what I did. And I came, I think 40th out of 120, 130, which is okay. It's not terrible. But the problem is my current battle, we're talking about this experience and knowledge thing, is I have the National 24 in next weekend. And I'm now in the situation of going, do I race? Don't I race? And I'm basically waiting for the advice of professionals. So physio.
This is the right thing to do, rather than browsing WebMD and seeing what form of knee crepitus you have.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got in touch with a physio and just waiting to see. I'm talking to him this evening, and then going to see whether it's doable or not. And if it's not doable, it's fine. Yeah. There's also part of it is being able to go, these things happen. The race is going to be there still in the future. I've done it freaking 3 times. I don't need to do a 4th one worst case scenario. And also you just realign and readjust your goals that you want to do. So I know that if I can't do the 24 next weekend, the National 12 is 2 weekends after that. So I can do the National 12.
Yeah, perfect.
Half the time.
But that's partly why I enjoy training the way that I do so much across so many disciplines, because it means if I end up with some sort of injury that limits my top end strength stuff, then I can just over index on get my FTP up for a couple of months. And then all of a sudden, before I know it, I might be enjoying it and I might be doing a time trial myself. Like these are the things that I've experienced in the past. Like the Ironman was the best example, right? I can swim. I'm not going to just start swimming. If in a month I'm going to be able to cycle, I can get a lot of swimming work under my belt and then really hit the ground running. The cycling will build my aerobic base, and that will then allow me to actually over-index on the running for that final stretch. And one way or another, I'm going to find a way to get to that finish line. That's exactly what happened, because I had the fluidity in my train. I think rigidity in training, well, rigidity full stop in whatever aspect of your life is actually a form of stagnation. And I think that stagnation can very much leave you actually much more exposed to these things getting you down. Because if you were placing all of your eggs in the basket of the 24-hour race, then you wouldn't be even remotely excited by that 12-hour race the following weekend. I think that the lesson there is it kind of comes back to, it touches on the elements of the job discussion we're having and the London discussion we were having before. If you place all of your faith and all of your mental energy into these external validators, the second they're not validating you, you'll lose your sense of purpose and fulfillment, and then you won't be happy day to day. And what's the point in investing all of your time and energy into these external validators if you're not happy day to day? So I think it's a conundrum that we all face in one way or another. But the reason I'm so sort of wanky and pseudo philosophical about training is because I've learned firsthand how much better I am at managing the micro stresses and everything that goes on in day-to-day life because of the process of training, realigning goals, figuring this out. How do I solve this problem? When do I put my head on the pavement and scream into it? Or when do I say, shut up, back of my head, keep going, work hard, you're just chatting bad things to yourself? Or when do I take the emotional side of things and let it sort of run free? Or when do I try and bottle it up for just the sake of plodding forwards? All these things only come having experienced new things, and actually it just comes down to, I say again, taking the first step towards these new things, because the capital interest effect that goes with that can be huge. I mean, the example I always use is my brother's a cricketer, and he got himself, well, I think through the club, got himself a watt bike 4 years ago. But when I was peak powerlifting, I was 102, give or take, kilos. I was competing in the 100 kilo weight class. Big. I was a big guy. I'm sort of 1 centimeter short of 6 foot. And I
love that you just said you're 1 centimeter short.
I know. It's my girlfriend's downstairs. If I said 6 foot, she'd come in and kick the door down and tell me I was lying. She'll hear nothing else this entire conversation, but she'd hear that.
I'm the same. I'm 183 centimeters, which I think is 5'11".
Yeah, I'm 183, but I think 183.1 or something. It's literally, it's so marginal, but it does allow you to round up, which is the one I've got in the back pocket. Yeah. But Jamie was in the. We've got a gym at the family house down south. Before COVID, we saw it coming, and he had the watt bike in there, and I just finished a strength session. We just finished a strength session, and he, as part of his rehab or something, had been prescribed an hour steady on the watt bike. And he came through an hour later. I'd showered, I'd sort of watched some TV or something, and then I was cooking some dinner, and he came through having done an hour on the watt bike. And I honestly cannot put into words how much my mind was blown that somebody, a human being, had done the same thing stationary for an hour, and genuinely just could not comprehend it at all. And then fast forward 4 years, and I'd sat on a turbo trainer for 36 hours. It's just, but the only way I got to that 36 hours was by continuously saying, yeah, I'll give it a go. Yeah, I'll give it a go. Yeah, I'll give it a go. Yeah, it's a bit scary, but fuck it, I'll give it a go. Yeah. And here we are, and these things don't intimidate me anymore. If they go wrong, they go wrong. I don't attach any real sense of identity or sense of purpose to the outcome. I attach the sense of identity and purpose to how do I prepare myself for these things? How do I process information throughout these things? and how can I translate these lessons into my sense of self as a whole. And that's why I'm so excited about this journey with Cervélo and the Extreme Triathlon World Tour, because it's a beautiful messenger for exactly that. I'm not going to go to these things and win. The Keltman, for example, I didn't make the high course. That's the iconic part of the Keltman. I missed it by 11 minutes, but I had 12 weeks of prep. I'm not a triathlete by trade per se, but aside from pissing myself on the bike, which would have got me to the high course, all jokes aside, I lost 18 minutes to pissing. I'm sure you're very well versed in this, but
I love a bike piss. I love it. There's something incredibly This happened on the National 100. There's something incredibly satisfying when you're like, oh man, I really, really need a piss, but I don't want to stop. And then you just lift off the saddle a little bit and you're like, yeah, it's coming. It's coming. I hadn't committed to learning because I didn't think it would be the thing that stopped me from getting to the high course. I'm not saying it is, but if you actually look at the raw maths of it, yeah,
it fucking was.
Yeah.
So that's the lesson. Again, that's a lesson that I've learned just being a bit out of practice with full distance triathlon. So yep. I can sit and mope about the fact I have sat and moped about the fact I haven't got to the high course, but the video Gymshark are producing, funnily enough, actually really tells the story really well. That just shares the fact that it's about the experience, it's about the community of the race, it's about the environment, it's about the remoteness, it's about the personal journey, and it doesn't matter where you come. And the whole way I'm interacting with this is I'd like to showcase the beautiful environment, the community, the race, and the fact that I'm there to learn more about myself than I am about anyone else, and that actually the time at the end of it doesn't really, with these races, my sole ambition for all of the Extreme Triathlon races will be making the high course. And as I get better and improve towards them, and probably sacrifice a little bit of the top end strength stuff as we go into more frequent sort of triathlon seasons, I guess, I'll get to more and more of them. But beyond that, I really, really don't think I'm ever going to be asked about my time, because I'm just so grateful and fortunate to have the experience to explore these environments and myself in such a way. And the message I really want people to extract from it, and the journey I'm about to go on with the rest of them, is the Swedeman's next on August the 14th, is just that taking the first step gets you there. I've gone from being absolutely shocked and horrified at the fact that my 15-year-old brother at the time could sit on a watt bike for an hour. And then here we are. So it's take one step at a time, the compound interest effect, and just actually saying yes and not letting that fear win when you think, no, I can't do that. Even if it's just something small, and one day at a time, 2 weeks at a time, a couple of months at a time, year at a time. And then before you know it, you're doing things that you could never have imagined of.
You're a very inspirational man. I've probably been told that by a lot of people, but I think it's important to reiterate those kind of things. It's lovely to hear you talk so openly and honestly about it. And it's also really, I find it really humbling to speak to people when they don't shout about like performance and results. And like there is obviously, there always is an element of that with sport. That's just sport. It's a competitive thing. But I do massively agree with you. When you get into these things that are silly long things, I think that should just be what we call all of them now, just silly long things.
Yeah.
When you get to silly long thing world, it's not the be all and end all. It really isn't. Like, I have so much respect for people who do win those kind of things, but I do also question
it's the variables as well, though, isn't it? It's the fact that there's so much that can go wrong, and you can't expect to beat the variables luck just can't happen.
Yeah, luck is huge. Like, I think I did this ride. When was it? End of May, which was it end of May? I can't remember when it was now. Basically, I was doing the challenge from Movember, which was basically, we called it the nuts and bolts ride because it was, the idea of this challenge was to cycle from the most western point of England to most eastern point of England in the quickest time that I could. And was doing it around Testicular Cancer Awareness Month, and basically started in Land's End and rode. And the idea was to get to Ness Point, which is basically what I've learned from this is that these points of the UK, Land's End, John O'Groats is quite nice. Nest Point, shitholes. There's nothing there. So don't direct your challenges around or any challenge.
Do you not need to pay to get into Land's End now as well?
Probably a freaking 50 quid or something stupid. Like it's weird because you've got like, it's like a tourist park, but you can go round the side. There's literally a road that goes around the side that doesn't go through the tourist park. And the tourist park bit's got like Wallace and Gromit land in it or something. It's very weird. But so I have more of a like for John O'Groats because the sign's always there. You can just go up to the sign. It's actually quite nice. Land's End, they take the sign away. So you can't, and they only put it up there in the daytime. And you have to pay to have your photograph taken of it. It's fenced off. And I was just like, this is fucking stupid. But there's like a really like shit one next to it, which just has like New York and John O'Groats in it. That's it. And it's like an estate agent sign, like it's a bit of a shit flimsy one. But the proper one isn't there unless you pay for it. So anyway, this challenge, Land's End to Nest Point, the first iteration, I think, is about I did 400k in 15 hours, and I was fucked. I was really fucked, to be expected. And I was in a place called Andover, which is just outside of London. And
yeah, I think I know this story.
Got jumped on by a bunch of guys with their dogs and tried to steal the bike.
They tried to steal the bike from under you, not like off the back of a car. Just they saw your bike and you and thought, I'm having that.
Yeah. And it really, really shook me up. Like, it really shook me up. And the guy that was filming it, Andy, who I've worked with on quite a few projects, he's a good egg, Andy. He literally, when I next saw him, was like, we're stopping, rides off. You're not in a good way. You're mentally really shaky. Like, I was shaky. I was crying. I was really, really got to me. Like, I'm a just short of 6 foot tall man covered in tattoos with a beard, which a lot of people having when I've traveled around the world apparently is quite intimidating. I don't think I'm intimidating, but apparently it is quite intimidating in certain countries and certain people. And I completely understand that. And I'm very respectful of that. It could be seen as intimidating, but there's this element of going, for me, that was really important about going, this situation made me feel about the size of a pea. And I was not good about it mentally. So we called it off and went back to Bristol, because that was kind of where we were like starting from, because one of the film guys lived in Bristol, Ed, and then Andy was in Brighton, and I'm in the Peak District. And it was quite central for everyone to get to. So went back to Bristol, and then I think 2 or 3 days later, we had a call because Shimano are supporting the project, which is absolutely incredible to work with those guys. They're good people. And I had a call with them. They were like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. And then we just carried on like talking it through a bit. And I just turned around and said, fuck it, let's do it again. And we'll do it. I can't remember what day it was, but we'll do it this day. And they were like, oh, you mean you want to start from Andover and just ride the other half of it? And I was like, no, we're doing it again. We're starting from the beginning at Land's End and riding all the way through again. And they were like, fair play, fair enough. Okay, that's cool. And with that challenge, it was, there was a lot of nerves and anticipation that went into the second take on it, but also I'd learned a lot from the first one from experience and on how much climbing there is in that first 400 kilometers. The Southwest is... Did
you tank it a lot less for the first 400?
I rode a completely different bike with a different gear ratio.
Right, yes.
So the first one I rode on a Cervélo R3 with a 52-36 on the front and an 1130 on the back. And then the second one I rode on the Sparrow 5 with road wheels on it, which is a Shimano GRX group set, which I don't even know what the chainring ratio is, 46-38 or something like that. It's something, it's like a weird ratio, but it's much more compact. So much more ability to spin up the hills a bit more. And I took it a bit easier. And I was like, the second go, it wasn't about, so Andy and I had this bet of going, if I can do the whole ride in under 30 hours, he would donate more to Movember. And the second go, I was like, do you know what? I'm not even going to think about that bet. I'm just going to ride it and get through it. And, whatever happens, happens. And if I need to stop for like 2 hours to have a little power nap, I'm going to have a power nap, which I did. I had a little power nap. just because I wasn't feeling safe, which is fair enough. You know, you get so sleepy and you start doing this.
Yeah.
I need to stop a little bit. And
you don't want to be doing that on a bike. On an ultra endurance event, you absolutely do not.
Yeah, so I stopped, had 2 hours of kit, and carried on, and ended up I did it in 29 hours and 45 minutes and something seconds, and I was just like, Andy, get that money in the pot.
Yeah,
but
that must have been rewarding.
Yeah, but it was, you know, removing that element and that thought process of that, and just effectively going, right, I'm doing this for the reasons that I'm doing this, not to do it as quick as I can. I'm doing it because it's to open up this discussion about mental health, originally to open up this discussion about testicular cancer, to allow people to realize that it's a thing, and to talk about that vulnerability that I felt as a nearly 6 foot tall male covered in tattoos with a beard, you know. And I don't know, it's probably very similar for you with any of these projects. The way the money is one part of it, 100%. It really helps charities. There's no two ways about that. But the biggest success for me is the messages from people when they say, what you've done has helped me because of X, Y, Z, or you talking about this has meant I've gone and checked my gonads to make sure that they're all right. I found a lump which I thought was a bit suspicious. I've gone and booked an appointment at the hospital. That is when it's a success.
Correct. And it only needs to be one person and job done, in my mind.
Exactly.
Yeah, the money is a cool metric to be able to play with, and it's a good way to get to draw more people in, and attach some sort of investment into the project. Because if they put money into it, 9 times out of 10, there will have been an emotional investment that comes with that in some degree.
Yep.
But yeah, the messages have always been the messages and the interactions that I've had off the back of it have always been what have made me want to do more, not the money.
Yeah.
And even if the money was going into my own pocket, it wouldn't be for it. The interactions are so much more valuable. The money just becomes I don't know. It's just that people like having trackable metrics. We all do. That's why everybody attaches so much of the notion of success to a salary, because it's the easiest trackable metric over time. But the charity value and projects are the things that you don't see, and the messages that you don't share, and some of the messages that never get sent, but the people that are influenced, things like that, and not knowing doesn't bother me. I say again, I've still got all those emails on that account, and I dip into them every once in a while if I ever doubt the direction I'm going.
Yeah.
And just sort of remind myself of the reasons why and the sort of journey I've been on, because it's easy in the ebbs and flows, especially the past, whatever it is now, 18 months. Are we that far in? 15, 16 months?
Some period that seems to be never ending.
Yeah, forever. Just to question purpose, question direction, and question what next, because it's just been very difficult to plan much further into the future, and planning further into the future allows you to roadmap out what to do next, and road mapping out what to do next gives you a bit more clarity, and a bit more clarity gives you a bit more comfort, and a bit more comfort makes you a bit happier, and all these things. So it just, working back like that makes it difficult to really actually be content day to day. So I think the trackable metric of cash is obviously the impact that cash then has. But at the end of the day, the value of that cash is in creating more of these conversations. So it's all cyclical in one way or another. And there's a cycling joke in there somewhere, but people can think of that themselves.
Amazing. And one thing I like to talk to, blah, 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 I can't speak. I never can speak anyway. One thing I like to do to try and end all recordings is I always ask for 5 life tips and hacks. And I know I kind of pre-warned you about this in an email, so you're lucky you got a heads up. A lot of people don't get a heads up. To give you a bit of I always refer to 1 or 2 that make me laugh so much I've had in the past. This is just to give you a perspective of some of the things I've had. So one that I genuinely use every time I cook now is putting all your herbs and spices in a bit of oil to start with, just to release the flavors for like a minute. Don't know why. It's so simple. It's a great tip. And then one that makes me piss myself laughing because I know how uncomfortable the guy was telling me it. And if anyone knows the episode, they'll know what I'm talking about. And I don't care. I'm going to say it's Andy Carr from a bike brand called Spoon. Was him telling me about how to use strawberry lube to sit a tire on the rim of a wheel. And he's a guy that was incredibly uncomfortable about this whole discussion. And I was like, you didn't have to bring this up. You chose to bring this up. So it's not my problem. So that's the kind of perspective of things that have come in those tips. So
yeah, you've applied some pressure there. I need to think of creative ways to use lube. That's a rabbit hole that we won't go down, I don't think. But
conversation, eh?
No, I'll. Do you want a specific split on tips versus hacks?
It could be 50-50, which is going to be really hard because it's 5, but it could be.
Yeah, no, I'll try and blend a tip and a hack into one. I think number one tip is figure out your optimal cognitive period of the day, and take note of that, and then try and make your most creative, your most important work in that period of time. This is something that I've learned quite harshly recently, is that routine and structure is great, but even better is optimizing that routine and structure around what needs to be done. Because my to-do list, just everything been going on the past few months, I've worn myself quite thin, and I've realized that anything monotonous, anything business as usual day to day is best left to the afternoon, because I can sort of go through it and I'm in a bit of a slump and it doesn't require my attention as much. But the first things that I do when I get into the office each morning is when I've found that I'm most cognitive, most switched on, most sort of focused, and I will do the most important tasks then. So replying to an email doesn't fit into that. But if I need to come up with some copy for a PDF or something, that's when I do it. So number one is ruthlessly analyze when you feel most effective, take note of that, and then try and build out the structures and habits that you need to optimize around that. Number two is, this isn't as relevant for this community as much, but it might be if anyone's ever on a mad weight cut. But from my powerlifting days and from my sort of days of trying to manage my weight and body fat around optimal performance, etc., sugar-free jelly. Sugar-free jelly is an absolute gift, and even better. So the instructions say half a pint of boiling water, half a pint of cold water, mix it, put it in the fridge.
Yeah.
If you do 100 milliliters of boiling water, mix it up entirely, add entirely cold water, so 400 mils of cold water, add 5 cubes of ice and stir that in as well. If there's any ice that hasn't sort of fully melted, just scoop that out, chuck in a handful of frozen raspberries, and you'll have the jelly in the fridge ready within half an hour. And you've got frozen raspberries in there. So that's the hack.
That's amazing.
I've got through so many bowls of that. It's quite absurd.
My mate, who is the nutritionalist for EF Pro World Tour Cycling Team, is obsessed with sugar-free jelly, and he is a bodybuilder as well. So
but it hydrates you as well. Like every night, I'm like going to bed, having had like desperate for a piss, but like, I haven't drank any water, and I'm like, well, I've had about 600 milliliters of water contained in the jelly. So yeah, that's that one there. Number 3 is kind of what we said in many ways before, but it's know when to step back. I think it's a vague philosophical one, but don't be afraid to pull the plug and to reassess and go again. It's the same. It's the reason why the military have debriefs. It's the reason why the military have briefings, and they're the hardest, most effective people on the planet. So if they're going to do it, then you can too. And that's a mistake that I used to make, even though I was told it over and over and over again. I think learning when the right time is to step back. So a tip to do that, I think, is just to try and be as objective about what the end goal is, and try and stay true to that as a sort of North Star metric. So to put it in as an example, if I'd been training for the Keltman, my goal was to get to the high course of the Keltman, and I ended up crashing on the bike because I'd been at threshold for an hour and I was delirious and hadn't eaten or anything. Then I would have abandoned my strategy for the sake of the end goal. Whereas what I should have done at that point is just adapt, reassess, and move forward. So I think reassessing and realigning the plan is a tip that's helped me massively. Another hack, what was the other one that I had? It's on my notepad, which I've left at the office. I apologise. So these are kind of off cuff.
I do that.
Hack is use time when waiting for things in the kitchen. Yeah. So if you've got oats in the microwave, if you've got a sauce bubbling away, don't sit there and scroll on your phone. Use that time to unload the dishwasher, to clean the cupboards, to clean your mugs, whatever it might be. If there is dead time in a space that you are waiting for time to pass, use the time to do something in the space. The kitchen's the best example because it's the most relevant one, but the same in the bathroom. If you're brushing your teeth, you can maybe wipe some surfaces. If you're waiting for if you've got a shower that takes an especially long time to heat up, then you can just, I don't know, put some bleach around the toilet, something like that. Just don't let dead time dictate the passage of time to you. You can use that as a bridge between the two.
I like that because I'm someone that when I'm cooking, I'm washing up while things are cooking, basically.
Yeah.
Like if I've got like to let something simmer for like, I love cooking anyway, but if I've got to let something simmer for like, I don't know, 10 minutes or something, you give it a little stir, wash up the rest of the stuff. Go back, give it a little stir, wash up the rest of the stuff. Instead of having to build up and washing up at the end of it. If you're cooking a meal for like 10 people or whatever it is, there's a shit ton of washing to do that. I do have a washing machine, but I didn't have a washing machine at all when I lived in London. So I'm always on autopilot to wash up in the sink. But it's just, I completely agree with that one. That's a great one.
Yeah. Another one is semi-biased, as I used to work for them. Well, used to work in the industry, but barefoot shoes. So implementing them as part of a routine is a 1%er, whether you want to call it one of those things. But basically, there's a study that's come out from Liverpool University recently that has indicated that you can increase the strength of your foot, measured through the FHL, and the sort of pressing power of your big toes was how it was measured, by 60% just by walking around daily in barefoot shoes. And for triathletes, for cyclists, etc., we spend a lot of time with our feet completely shut off from actually moving, and cycling shoes basically function as casts. You're not actually using your feet in any tangible way there. You're not activating them in any way, and that's why blood flow is so poor in them. But wearing barefoot shoes day to day can increase your foot strength by 60%. That's something that I've been in them for almost 2 years now, and I feel much, much stronger in my ankles, in my feet, in my whole kinetic chain as a result of having got used to them and wearing them day to day to walk in. But don't let the purists out there that saying born to run is the way that they live their life. You must run barefoot shoes, all this, all that, because there is a middle ground that you can find where you wear them for certain tasks, like walking the dog for 5,000 steps a day, walking to and from the office, but you can still run in maximalist shoes. You can still run in Hokas if you want to for the sake of performance. But there is a bit of a camp out there that's made it seem like you're all or nothing. But as a day-to-day hack that you can implement, it's one of the few things you can do that without really changing anything other than what you have on your shoes, you are improving your overall physical strength and stability in many ways.
So this is something that I've genuinely been looking into recently, as I have a lot of foot issues, which is caused by, I have like I suffer with the tendonitis, but I also have a very, very high arch, and I have to have special metatarsal pads in my shoes. And right. Genuinely, it's interesting you bring it up. I've been looking into these like barefoot shoes because my cousin, who used to be a bodybuilder and does triathlons and stuff, is like, he is always, it's exactly the same thing, using them for walking his dogs, going to the shops in them, that kind of thing. And he's just like, I just think it helps strengthen your feet a bit more.
They also feel great, to be fair. I mean, the most I've got slightly wider than average feet, but most of conventional footwear is too narrow. They are too narrow because of traditional fashion-based trends, which means that normalized footwear has become narrower than it should be to allow our toes to properly interact with how we're moving. So just the wider toe box effect is something that I've really enjoyed from the get-go. But for transparency's sake, I wear them for absolutely everything. I've got casual pairs. I've got I've got pairs I could wear with a shirt and a jacket as well. I don't have like dress shoes, but there are brands out there that make them, funnily enough. There's an Italian leather company that does, but about 300 quid. So that's for another time. But I run trails in them up to about 15K. but road running for the sake of, and off the bike for any transition stuff, or when my bike volume's high, just because obviously the amount of work going through my calf, I take a bit of drop and a bit of cushioning for road running and any triathlon stuff, just for the sake of performance and speed, and actually taking a bit of stress off my calves. But I feel much more stable and much less impacted by the effect of that cushioning as a result of wearing them all the time for everything else. So I feel like there is a balance to be had for everyone. And I think just easing in, you do need to ease into it slowly, because if you go from wearing a shoe with a 5mm drop to walk around day to day and go to a 0 and you're doing the same amount of steps, and you're stretching your Achilles way more. So you do need to ease into it. It's something that people need to be careful with. And far too many people are really born to run and then decide I'm going to run 10K with no shoes on, and like, what? How have I torn my calf? Well, several reasons, but no, I'm a big proponent of them, and I've got a pair on right now that I've been wearing all day.
There you go. That's it. That's it.
Yeah. Is that 4 or 5? I can't remember.
I think it was 5. I'm not really sure. It sounded like it could be 5. I'll take it as 5.
Okay.
To take the stress away from you not having your notebook as well, because
no, I feel like there might be one more that was on the tip of my tongue, but I don't know whether I actually said all of the ones I had down before that anyway. So who knows? I
do that all the time, where I'm like, oh yeah, it's just in this notebook which is on the other floor of this house.
I remember looking at it. I put my pen in it. I was like, I don't need that, do I? No, you can leave that here. Got up and left like two and a bit hours ago. It was now.
Yeah. I do it all the time. So I feel it's like the regular one for me is I actually have a desk on the floor above, but I really like working on the ground floor where I'm at now. Yeah. And all of my stuff is on the desk on the floor above. Yeah, I always just come and sit and work down here, and I'm like, it's kind of fun. I just had to go up and have calls, and I'm like, oh, give me 1 minute, I need to go up and get
yeah.
But anyway, thank you, Fergus, so much for your time. I'm very, very glad that 1, Gillian put us in contact, and 2, personally for me, this was a conversation I kind of actually really enjoyed having, considering how many things I've got going on right now, this debate with like the National 24 and stuff. So it's very, very refreshing to talk to someone who has a similar mindset, and just nice to hear someone who just says things as it is. Doesn't beat around the bush and talk bullshit, just says it as it is. So
I like to pride myself on that. I think transparency is something that we don't get a lot of these days. But a lot of that comes from having learned that I need to be better at being transparent with myself as well. So there we go. There's the self-awareness element again.
You nailed it. Right, I'm going to stop this recording.